Chapter 22. Dare blinked and found that she was sitting on the stream's edge. No more golden pictures flowed by. She stuck her face into the icy water and rubbed her cheeks furiously. She yanked herself back and gasped for air, all the while trying not to notice how much her hands were shaking. She remembered that first elf's expression, that mask of fear. She picked up her axe and stumbled uphill to the canoes and back to work where she swung the blade against logs for as long as she could make herself. Something inside her snapped. She threw the axe down and marched over to where Jacob was merrily swinging his own axe against a felled trunk. He wasn't using his battle axe, she noticed, and saw it on a special sheath slung across his back that crowded next to his sword. She put her hands on her hips. "Why the hell are we building canoes when the river is mostly ankle-deep?" He struck his axe into the wood and stretched. "Are you even old enough to curse, Dare?" "Damn right I am." She pointed to the water. "There is no way we can pilot these things." "Sir. You forgot, sir. This is your final warning." "All right, sir. There is no way we can pilot these things down the river, sir. You, sir, yourself, sir, said there was no way into Indaleria, sir." He grinned. "We could if the river were higher. The rapids and tight turns will be a challenge, but one we can handle." He winked. "We have thought of this. Don't worry. By the way, make sure your tent won't flood when it rains, because it's going to rain quite a bit." She stared at him, but at least pondering this shut out the sights of the wind gates. "Dare, floods rise fast up here. We ride down on the flood on the river, while the water here drops down to what it was. No one can follow us." "Right," she managed. He sighed. "Just stay in your tent. The rain will be cold, and we don't have the right gear for it. It's hard to make it rain when it's time for snow. It's already getting into winter up here." Dare tapped the ground with her boot. "I don't think we'll need as many canoes as we've got, though. I counted a score in our party, and even at 2 to a canoe, we have 5 too many." "Do you pick up every little detail?" He cocked an eyebrow down at her. She shrugged. "Another party is meeting up with us." He lifted the axe again. "So tell me, where are all the sentries?" "There's 2 on the path we came from," she answered, and then scowled in thought. I didn't see any more." "Still, you got some noticing done. As for the rest," he grinned, "they're watching over us." She followed his gaze up into the towering pines. "Oh. Now, if you don't get back to work, you'll be going without a meal." "Yes, sir." After a few more hours of labor, she met up with Kelin, and Jacob instructed them to put up tents for the camp. The night captain came around to inspect after they'd finished. He nodded. "Good job. Now go bathe your feet. You've got to do that every night. Your feet take care of you, so you need to care for them. After that, I order you to retire to your tent and stay there." He raised his hands. "Well, what are you waiting for?" "Dare! Kelin!" A voice pounced out of the darkness. Fallon came flying through the tent flap and landed between them. The soup in the wooden bowl he carried in his hands splashed as he slammed down into a seat, sending some of it soaring for freedom. "Easy, little one," Lady Eve called. She carried a second dish. "We brought you both supper. It's leftover stew, but that's what we have out here." "Yeah, stew a king would die for." Kelin snatched the bowl from Fallon. "You know, I think I might be too exhausted to eat." Dare accepted hers from the cook. "You, Sir Jacob, and Sir Amthros are the only people who will even speak with us." She smiled wanly. "The others may have been more willing if you weren't so antagonistic toward the Duke, although your speech probably saved this little one's father for now." Fallon's head bobbed up, looking ready to cry. "I want to see him." "He's fine, my child." Evelyn's soft smile melted the tension. This is a proving ground for the three of you, and though you have faced trials, this ordeal is far from over. Dare took a bite and chomped down on the spoon, hard. Ow! She started mashing her food. This is not what I expected from the elves, with your exception, my lady. I will say that I am not impressed. Evelyn's smile dipped. What you said troubled them because much of it is true, and they don't wish to admit it. Yes, we do not share in the detriments of age, but we are living creatures, and we must learn what is right and what is wrong. Wicked things tempt us. You have also met us when we are unbalanced due to tragedy. We've forgotten how to appreciate these trials that humans face every day. Kelin sucked down a mouthful. I can't imagine the elves making the same mistakes we do. Oh, we can. She nodded. But since we're older, however, we're supposed to already know what humans are always having to learn. She sighed, and the glow in her sapphire eyes faded. To let you in on something, I married a human, but he perished long ago. Old age? Dare ventured. She shook her head. Her voice creaked. No, he'd found a way to remain young. We wed in secret since Indaleria couldn't know. I met him while cooking for an army, as I am now. This wouldn't be recent to you, of course, but we were fighting the Kelin then, too. She looked back up, her eyes bright again. However, that is past. Presently I am entrusting Thalan's safety to you. As you know, most of the elves do not approve of his heritage. But, the boy protested, pushing out his lower lip. She smiled down at him. You're a God-sent gift, and now you have new friends to help you through these heartbreaks. Kelin held up his hands. But we're prisoners. The lady lifted one regal eyebrow. I cannot care for him at this time, and I know that you will fight on his behalf. Dare nodded. Of course. Good, Lady Eve declared. Then Thalon is your charge, both of yours. If there is a traitor amongst us, I know that Thalon will be safe with you. Thalon snuggled close to Dare, who nearly pushed him away in reflex. Do you think there is one? Kelin asked. The cook shrugged. It may be a lie to sow discord and doubt in our ranks. A ruse which, if it is, you can see is working. Or perhaps a less insidious bluff to purchase another day. Dare stared. You didn't answer the question. The elf matched her stare without blinking, and Dare felt her eyes water against those multifaceted gems. The lady finally replied, No, I do not think the Kelin is lying. But I also do not think that he can be trusted not to lie. She left, leaving only the lingering scent of spring flowers. Dare frowned, sitting straight-backed, holding her bowl and looking both miffed and perplexed. Kelin sighed and tossed a pebble through the small crack in the tent flap. So, who wants to tell a story? I just want to hear the story where Mama's alive and Dad's not tied up, Thalon muttered. And the elves never caught us, Kelin chimed. We ran away from the Kevin and lived out our lives in the citadel of Palans. Kelin, Dare swatted his shoulder. He shrugged. On the whole, she pulled her knees up under her chin. I think I like being the elves' prisoner better. Outside the thin canvas walls, the first crash of thunder reverberated between the nearby peaks. A raindrop crashed into the roof of their tent, followed by an unending rush. Dare peeked out and saw the rain leaving tiny craters in the dirt. The waning sunlight caught the fat drops, and thousands of individual rainbows glistened before they kissed the ground. Two canoes slipped through the rain and darkness into the rapids, disappearing down the river. Farther up the water's edge and a whirled away through the blanketing torrent, Thistle dodged as nimbly as a dancer. The knife slammed down again, whistling through the air and rain, never finding its target. The masked attacker was tall, but armed only with the knife. The ceaseless deluge tugged their feet deeper into the mud with each step. The thunderstorm roared only a few hundred yards above them, and the lightning was blinding. Thistle's hands were still bound in front of him, but against a knife he had time. Time enough for his guards to arrive with their big, shiny swords. And that raised the question of why his assailant had chosen such a small blade. Would his sword have been recognizable? He knew winning a knife fight was usually never as quick as one fatal strike. An attacker would leave himself open for counterattack if he dove for that lethal thrust with a short blade. So for now, the would-be assassin played it safely. After all, he had the only weapon. Thistle held up his hands to block a facial slash, and the knife sliced across his forearms. He was bleeding from a dozen cuts along his arms, hands, and sides. The attacker never exposed himself for the Kelin to grab him. Thistle's eyes flickered over his assailant's shoulder. Where in the corners of hell were his guards? The thought stole over him like the icy, rising waters in the river. What if this was a guard? Several people who wished him dead had the authority to order such an action. He was certain that the attacker was not a Kelin because a storm reader would try to rescue him first. He curled his wrists in toward his body as he felt another lick of the knife across his arms. He grunted, but didn't react overtly to the new gash. His foot connected with his attacker's knee in a satiating crack. The attacker slid in the mud, swinging with the blade. Thistle leaned back and the knife passed above his chest. His hands snaked out, and he snatched his assailant's wrist. He squeezed until he heard his opponent hiss. He kicked again. The masked man jerked out of his grasp, and Thistle slipped in the mud, trying to keep his balance. The assassin limped back and dropped the knife. Thistle reached out, but the attacker jumped away. He turned and ran, melting into the rain. The Kelin took a few steps after him, but stopped. He raised the knife and cut the cords on his wrists. He sighed and looked into the open, inviting darkness beyond the camp. Then he sat down on the cold, soaking ground and waited.